Okay, so as I was saying, we're going to be learning about the past and how can we speak in the past. So something to do with our lives, yesterday, last night, or last year, or further back into time. Okay, so the past simple is really important way that we can speak in the past, and that's what we're going to be looking at in our classes. Now, we heard an audio about these two people. Okay, so we've got a photo here. It's a black and white photo. And then we've also got a current photo in the time that they're speaking here. And, you know, you could see it might be the same people. The background looks pretty similar. So we just heard an audio and we're going to answer some questions now. So we had two people in the photographs. Did you get their names, who they were? Donna and Steve. Okay, so the two people in the photo are Donna and Steve. I'll just write their name here. Donna and Steve. And what did we learn about them? We know that the photo, the black and white one, was taken in 1981. Okay, so did you hear that in the audio, 1981? And the one that we saw, the color one, was in 2015. Okay, so have a listen again to the audio that is talking about these two people. We know now the man is named Stephen and the woman is Donna. This photo was from 1981. This one from 2015. Okay, but try and hear how they use the past simple, you know, your action words in the past. So what happened? What was done? What was taken? Okay, so let's listen one last time.
Track 56. Unit 6, opener.
During the 1970s and 80s, Chris Porsche took lots of black and white photographs of local people in his city. 30 years later, Chris looked for the same people by putting the old photos on his website and in the newspaper. Donna and Stephen saw their photo from 1981 and they contacted Chris. It shows them as children in front of their old family house. They don't live in the house now, but they live in the same city. They returned to the street and Chris took the second photo in 2015.
Okay, so just some pronunciation. So when we, let's go back a bit. So remember, we're talking about the past simple. We know that we used the verb to be, okay, which is was or were, but depends on your subject. If I was, he was, she was, it was, or they were, or we were. And we use this verb to be, remember, because it's one of the most important verbs. Only we use it when we need to talk about our age. Like I was 20 years old in the year 2000. I was in the city last weekend when we talk about location, places. I was a student before I studied. An adjective, I was really happy this weekend. An emotive verb, sorry, is the action of a feeling. So I was really happy this weekend. He was very tall when he was a kid. An adjective is when we describe something. And I was born in Australia. To make a negative, we say not. So wasn't, I wasn't born in Brazil. She wasn't a teacher. Or weren't, if it's for they weren't, or we weren't at the party yesterday. Maybe I'm talking about me and someone else. We weren't there. And remember we said, so we're just recapping, there was and there were. We can use them with nouns. So for singular nouns, there was, you know, there was a spider in my room. There was a lot of students. Sorry, there was a student in my class from Peru. There were is for plural. There were many students last year in this class. There were so many people at the party. There were a lot of people on the bus. There were a lot of people in the city. And to make a questions, we have the W's, what, where, when, why, who. Then we put the verb to be, subject, verb. Or you can make the question with was or were and the subject. So this is what I wanted to remind you about the time expressions. Always easier to start to make a sentence when you talk about when did something happen before saying what happened. So you could say last month, last year, or in the morning, or last night, last evening, or, you know, on an occasion. Occasion means like on Easter, on Christmas last year, on my birthday, on New Year's Eve, or on the weekend. So on the weekend, that's a past time phrase. Or you could say last week, last month, or last year. So it's always easier if you use these time expressions in the beginning of a sentence, before the subject and before the verb. Okay, so then we got to the past simple. We know this is for regular verbs. We add the ed. And irregular, just be careful. You have to look at a list of irregular verbs because there's so many of them and they all have their own rules. So to go is went, to make is made, to see is saw, to teach is taught, to write is wrote, to buy is bought, to take is took. And to make a negative sentence in the past, you say didn't, verb, no ed. Now let's look at the pronunciation. So if I said live, and this one is lived, okay, it only has like one syllable, so lived. But if I look at paint, this one is painted. So how would I know how to make that sound for my ed? If the word live, we know that if any verbs end in an E, all you do is just add the D. It sounds like this, lived. It's like the E is silent, lived. Like, so the verb like, to like someone or to like something, it ends in an E, so all I need to do is add an ED, but the sound of it is like, d. So the E is silent, liked, lived. That's not how we spell it, but I'm just showing you the pronunciation. So work, the same thing with work. So we do add that ed, but it's worked, worked. Yesterday, I worked for so many hours. I worked so much yesterday. So that's how it sounds, worked. You do not pronounce the E. And we call this one syllable. So it means that it has one sound, like lived, liked, worked. But if you listen to these words, they have two sounds to them. So how would I know? Usually because paint, we know we need to keep the ed. So it's pain, and then it becomes ted. This one was just lived, liked, worked. But this was painted, wanted, traveled, started. Can you see how it has two sounds? So how would I know? It ends in a T. Usually the ones that end in a T, one, and then you have to put the TED as another sound, wanted. Okay, traveled. Now the ones that have a 3 sound to them is the ones that usually have the vowels in the middle, like visit, to visit someone, to visit your grandmother, to visit your friend, becomes visited. So the I has its own sound, visited. Okay, so that's called syllabus. How do we know how to pronounce the ending to the past simple. Okay, so now you're going to write about someone's life that inspires you. So write about someone's life who inspires you. Inspires you means that you really feel, you know, something good when you think of them. Maybe they changed your life. Maybe they helped you. Maybe they just always had something positive about them. You really found it good. Like you really, really look up to them. You know, it was amazing to know them. So write about someone's life who inspires you. Now, because we are using the past simple, I know someone like your mum is someone who inspires you, but then you're going to be using the present simple because she's still alive. We want to think of someone who's maybe not alive because it's just easier to practice past simple. So, for example, you could talk about, you know, a president from the 1950s or someone from the past. So let's look at some examples. Remember, we're writing about someone's life who inspires you. And the reason is because we want to practice the past simple. We want to talk about actions that happened in the past and they're finished and completed. They're not happening anymore. So that's sentences like, or a writing like, so as I said, it needs to be someone who's not alive. This one's a little bit short, but it works. Mr. Roger Reynolds Pombo was, so remember the verbs to be, he was, because he's not now, but he was the inventor of the artificial heart pacemaker implant. This invention has saved, so look at your ED, has saved millions of lives of people with heart problems. Okay, another one was, okay, this is a good example by Brian. So Brian writes, this is the image here. Does anyone recognize him? So Brian writes, okay, remember practicing our past simple? Gabriel Garcia Marquez was a Colombian writer and journalist. That means he's not anymore now, but he was known for his unique style. His most acclaimed novel is 100 Years of Solitude. He is considered one of the most influential writers of the 20th century and was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1982 for his contribution to magical realism. He died in 2014, and in 2016, as a tribute, they put him on the 50,000 Colombian pesos note. Now, this is a perfect example because one, it uses the past simple. It's talking about actions in the past with the ED. Remember, you've got irregular, and the verb to be. And number two, he's using the time expressions. The 20th century, 1982. Remember, we learned how to talk about the years. And number three, it uses the money, the currency, which we just did in our lessons. So this was a perfect example. But you don't have to do all of them. You can talk about someone, like this one is another interesting one from Anna. Okay, we all know this image. Martin Luther King was a prominent American politician of the 20th century. He was born in Memphis in 1929. He attended, that means he went, to Booker Washington High School in Atlanta. He was married to Coretta Scott, with whom he had 4 children. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He became the man who received the most recognition of all time. Okay, inspiring people. So Eloise, Oscar Niemeyer was a Brazilian architect. Good. So using the verb to be, he was a Brazilian architect. Considered one of the key figures in the development of modern architecture, so buildings. He was born. Good, we've got born. We know we use it to talk about when someone was born in 1907 in Rio de Janeiro and died, that's an irregular past verb, in 2012 Also in Rio de Janeiro. Good. Also in the same city. He became. Good. That comes from the verb to become. So the past is C-A-M-E with the A. He became well known after planning the city of Brasilia, which became the capital of Brazil in 1960, and also participated, good, regular verb, with the ED, in the group of architects nominated, another verb, ED, by UN member states who designed, ED, the United Nations headquarters in New York in the United States. Good, and we have an image of him here. So really good. Good past verbs. Okay, Fo says, so you are talking about someone now because he is, so we need to change it. Is my father was, so I'll put it in the past. Let's just make it a little bit in the past. Okay, so we need to say, that's why I wanted people that are not really alive now, but let's see. So my dad, who gave me, good, because that comes from the verb to give, who gave me a lot of inspiration, and I learnt a lot. So you don't really need who here. You can just say my dad, which is the subject, and then the verb, gave me a lot of inspiration. We can connect this, which, a lot of inspiration. I would put a full stop. I learnt a lot from him. So good, learned. I learned a lot from him. I might, instead of repeating the subject, remember we use these other words, reference words, so that we don't need to keep repeating the subject. So again, I don't want to say is because we want to practice to be. So he was a strong man who, I'm just going to put this verb in the past, who loved his children very much. He shouldered, really good, all the hardships to take care of his family. So really good verb. That means he did everything to make sure his family was taken care of. He took on all the burdens, all the worries. You know, he put it on his shoulders. It's a saying in English. In the past, my father, you don't really need this when I was young. Maybe when I was young is a better time phrase. When I was young, my father taught. Good, that comes from the verb to teach. So he taught me many memorable lessons. Beautiful, good for sharing that. So I just be careful like with how you connect your sentences. So you can see I changed it a little bit. Okay, Yana, good. So we have this woman, Maya Angelou. Yeah, okay. I'll go to Javiera. So Javiera's got this woman here. Really interesting. Lucia Godoy Alcayaja was also known as Gabriela Mistral. So Lucia. So I might say also known as Gabriela Mistral was, so that's a better flow of a sentence. So this person, also known as Gabriela Mistral, was a Chilean poet. She was the first Latin American author to receive a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1945. Her image is featured. That means you can see it. It's featured on the 5,000 Chilean peso banknote. Gabriela Mistral's books are a reflection of her own life, her difficult childhood, her successive and disappointments in love. I might put the last one, and her successive and disappointments in love. She was admirable for her militant feminism. Okay, very strong woman. So she wanted to empower women to be like, like she had like a military army, like, feeling how she gave women. And her fight against dictatorships. Really good. Thank you for sharing that. So have a look at the little grammar. And Yana, ready? Or no, still updating? Sorry. She's not here. I think I can correct it. Okay, so Maya Angelou, an inspiring figure, overcame challenges of racial segregation. That means like, people that are black and white, separation. I might, just to make it a bit simpler English, separation and abuse, to become a prominent poet and advocate for civil rights. Her life and work celebrated, might just add an ED to that verb, human resilience and the fight for justice and equality. Her legacy endured, again, I might make that a past verb, as a source of inspiration for many worldwide. Good, and we have a photo of her there. Okay, good. So that was, writing about someone who inspires us. So now we are going to look at visiting the past. We can see here we've got a cave, and there's this woman, and there's a fire here, and it looks very ancient, like in the past, ancient caves or something. Okay, so let's listen to part of a TV documentary and answer some of these questions. So we want to know, the caves are in the Mustang region of northern what? So where is the place in northern what? Humans made the caves about something years ago. Okay, so we need a time. Many people lived in them until the something century. The caves were warm and something. Yandu Bista was something in a cave. In the end, her family moved to the town, but she says, I like living in a cave. Okay, so let's listen to a documentary about this woman and why the caves. Okay, we're going to find out all these answers. Okay, so let's listen.
Track 60, Unit 6B.
The Mustang region is in the Himalayan mountains of northern Nepal, and it's famous for its ancient caves. Humans made the caves about 1,000 years ago, and many people lived in them until the 15th century, before they built houses and moved to towns. The caves were warm and dry, and they were safe because of their location. Even today, you can find people who lived in the caves. This woman, Yandu Bista, was born in a cave, and she grew up here with her family. Life was difficult. They didn't have water in the cave, so she went to the river every day and brought water up the mountain. In the end, her family moved to the town, but she says, I like living in a cave better.
Okay, so we know that this is a region in northern Nepal. Okay, so northern Nepal, next to India. Humans made the cave about 1,000 years ago, or you can write it like this, 1,000. So remember, in English, we use the comma after numbers from 999, or you can say 1,000. Okay, so people lived in them about 1,000 years ago. Many people lived in them humans made the caves about 1,000 years ago, and people lived in them until the 15th century. Okay, remember, we know what time this is. This is from the 15th century is from the year 1400 to 1499. Or you can say the 1400s to 1499. That's the 15th century. That's that time. It's called that time. And remember, a century is every 100 years. So you can see that there's 100 years in each century. Okay, then we had the caves were warm, and you should have heard the word dry. That means they weren't wet, like they weren't you know, the rain wouldn't come in them. They wouldn't have a wet feeling. They were just warm and dry. And Yandu Bista was born. She was born in a cave. In the end, her family moved to the town, but she says, I like living in a cave better. So she actually liked it better. Okay, so now we have some past simple irregular verbs and negatives. We did talk about them. You know, verbs like go was went. So do all verbs in the past simple end in ed? Let's have a look. Do they all end in an ed? No, because we know we have irregular verbs, which means they break the rule, they have their own rule. So not all past simple verbs have an ed. No. Does the verb change for he, she, or it? No. You have a subject and the verb. It doesn't matter if the subject is I, you, he, she, it, we, they. You just put the ed if it's regular, or you use whatever the irregular word is. What auxiliary verb do you use for the negative? So to make a negative sentence, we say didn't verb. Now remember, there's no ed. So it's like saying yesterday I didn't study. Last week I didn't go to the markets. Last year I didn't travel. Okay, there's no ed. So didn't, did not, verb. Did not go, did not see, did not study, no ed. So some sentences, let's do them together. Humans made the caves about 1,000 years ago, question 5. Many people lived. That's what we heard in the audio. Many people lived in them until the 15th century. So we can see the ed, past action. They built houses and moved to towns. Yandu Bista was born in a cave. She grew up. Now, this is an interesting verb for 2 reasons. One, because it has 2 words, so you have to keep them together. So subject, grew up. She grew up. I grew up in Australia. You grew up in Brazil. So grew up means like I was raised. Another word to say that is I was raised. That means that that's where I spent my childhood. So I spent my childhood in Australia. You spent your childhood in Brazil. Maybe you're going to live in Australia for the rest of your life until you die here, but you grew up in Brazil. You were raised in Brazil because that's your childhood was there. And they didn't have, so we have a negative here. Remember, you don't put an ed. They didn't have water in the cave. She went to the river every day. So remember the verb go. Yesterday, I went to the market. Last week, I went to my grandmother's house. Whenever we need to say go, to go somewhere in the past, okay, if it's any time before now, we say went. And so she went to the river every day and brought water up to the mountain. Okay, and brought. It's an irregular verb. Okay, we've got some sentences here. So I was born in 1939. Yeah, I was born in 1985. So you can make your own sentence. When were you born? Okay, you can just put your own year next to that. So my sentence is, I was born in 1985. So just write your answer in your book. I grew up in a big city with my brother and 2 sisters. Now, for me, my answer is I actually grew up in a small town with my family. So I was in a small town in Western Australia. I was not in Adelaide. I was not in the city. I was in Australia, but in a small town. So you need to write the sentence for yourself. Did you grow up? You could say, I grew up in the village, in a big town. You could say, I grew up in a big city. I grew up in the village. I grew up in the mountains. Okay, I grew up in the hills. Maybe it's the hills. So whatever is your answer, you write that sentence for you. So for me, I grew up in a small town. Okay, so make sure you write your answer. I went to my first school when I was 4 years old. So yeah, for me, I went to my first school when I was 4. So you can write your answer. Was it when you were 5 or maybe you were 3? When did you first go to school? So for me, I was 4. I got a bike from my parents, but I got one from my grandparents when I was 7. So my answer is, someone said I didn't, that you can make it a negative. Maybe I didn't get a bike when I was young. But someone said, but I got one from my grandparents when I was 7. So make that sentence for you. What is your information that you want to say? When did you get your first bike? Maybe you could say, I never got a bike when I was a kid. Or I got a bike when I was 3 years old, maybe. Okay, so you write your answer. I had a job on the weekend. Or you could say, I didn't have a weekend job. That's another way to say it. I didn't have a weekend job when I was young. Or you could say, I did have a weekend job. That means I had to work on Saturday and Sunday. Or you could say, I did have a weekday job. That means from Monday to Friday, a weekday job. Or if you worked 7 days a week, I had a 7-day job. I had a 6-day job. Okay, whatever the answer is true for you when you were young. Okay, so it could be weekend. It could be weekday. I left home when I was 16. Whatever is your answer, I left home when I was 20. Or if you want, I am still at home, but we want to use the past. I haven't left home yet, maybe, but we don't want to practice this one because this is the past, the present perfect. But you have to put when did you leave home. Okay, so let's look at some questions. We've got a conversation. We need to add did or didn't. But before we do that, let's have a look at some questions. How do we make questions? So we said this before. You can start with the verb to be, and then you put the subject. So for example, was your party good last weekend? Were your parents in Colombia? Was your friend in your class as well? Or you could start with the W's or the H. Remember, the W is what, when, why, where, which, or who. So for example, what was your favorite music when you grew up? Who was your favorite teacher when you were young? Why was your grandmother always so angry? Okay, so we can make questions about the past using the what, when, why, where as the beginning, or the how. You know, how was your day? That's a past question. How was your evening? How was your weekend? How was your last trip? You could also put did here. So you could say, what did you study when you were at university? How did you come to class? How did you come here? Did you come by bus, by train? How did you read all that book? Or how did you find that movie? Like, did you enjoy it? What did you do last weekend? Okay, so that's how we can make a question. Did, subject, verb. Or you can make a question with did. Did you like the movie? Did you enjoy your class? Did you learn Portuguese when you were young? Did you speak other languages? Did you meet your husband at the cafe? whatever. And when you hear did, you have to answer yes, I did, or no, I didn't. Okay, so we have a conversation. But before we listen to the conversation, we know did is an auxiliary verb. It comes from the verb to do. And we use it. You could see it's not the main verb because this is the main verb. It's like an auxiliary verb. It just helps to create a question. So, did you travel to Paris? Okay, travel is the main verb and did is the auxiliary verb. Okay, it's called the auxiliary verb. Did you travel to Paris? Did you like the movie? Okay, remember this is the main verb. What is it that you want to know? Did you meet your husband at school? Okay, let's listen to a conversation. And then we're gonna hear what happened on the weekend. Okay, so it's somebody's conversation about what they did on the weekend. So make sure you listen to those words, did. Make sure you listen to how the question was asked. How did someone respond to the question? Okay, make sure you know that this is a past simple conversation. Okay, talking about something that happened on the weekend. That's in the past. Okay, let's listen and answer the questions.
Track 62, Unit 6B.
Hi. How was your weekend? It was great, thanks. What did you do? I went to Birmingham. Oh, did you go shopping? No, I didn't. I went to the museum. Oh, right. What did you see there? An exhibition about the lives of people from the 15th century. It was fantastic. Did you go with anyone? I didn't go to the museum with anyone, but I met an old friend afterwards for lunch.
Okay, let's look at the answers. So, hi, how was your weekend? It was great, thanks. What did? Okay, what did you do? I went to Birmingham. Oh, did you go shopping? Okay, that's how we start a question. Remember number 4, that's how we start a question. Did you go shopping? No, I didn't. I went to the museum. All right. And what did you see there? An exhibition about the lives of people from the 15th century. It was fantastic. Did you go with anyone? I didn't go to the museum with anyone, but I met an old friend afterwards for lunch. Okay, so now you are going to get into groups and the same thing, you know how you have that conversation? You're going to create a conversation about what you did on the weekend. So imagine you visited an interesting place on the weekend. Remember using past simple. So it's a dialogue. That means it's a conversation, maybe with 2 people or more. It's up to you. Let's read some of the examples that we have here. Okay, so did you go? Where did you go? So you imagine that you visited an interesting place. So you want to tell your friend or something. This is an example that we have from Jimena, okay, and her team. So what did you do last weekend? And Sebastian said, I visited the museum downtown. There were some fascinating exhibits. And then there's another person, Josh. He says, really? I missed out. What kind of exhibits did they have? And Sebastian says, they had a history exhibit about ancient civilization and another one on modern art. It was quite diverse. Jimena says, I wish I joined you. Did you enjoy it? Sebastian says, yes, it was amazing. I learnt a lot about different cultures and their contributions to life. What did you do? Josh says, I spent the weekend at home. I watched a couple of classic movies. It was a relaxing time. Jimena says, sounds nice. Which movie did you watch? And Josh says, I watched Casablanca and Gone with the Wind. They never get old. Sebastian said, speaking of movies, I saw a great film on Friday night. It was a suspense thriller. And Jimena says, oh, really? What was it called? Sebastian said, it was called The Silent Witness. The plot kept me on the edge of my seat. And Josh says, I'll have to check that out. I love a good thriller. Okay, so you could see that that was a conversation with three people, and they're just talking about what they did on the weekend. Okay, but make sure that one person went to an interesting place. Could be the museum, it could be the park, or to see a theater, to see a play, to see a comedy show, maybe just to see a church service, a religious service. Maybe you went to a festival. Okay, so make sure that one of the friends went somewhere interesting. Okay. Okay, so we were creating a dialogue, a conversation, imagining that we were in an interesting place. So Angeli's group says, hi, how are you? And Fo says, hey, I'm very good, and you? Angie says, I'm good, thanks. How was your weekend? Fo says, it was fantastic, and yours? Angie says, pretty quiet. What did you do that was interesting? Fo says, well, I went to visit Kangaroo Island. It was an incredible experience. Good. Angie says, wow, sounds exciting. What did you do there? Good. So she wants to know what activities. What did you do there? And Fo says, I got to see the incredible diversity of wildlife, from kangaroos to sea lions. I also did some hiking on the natural trails and enjoyed the breathtaking views. Angela says, I'm so jealous. It must have been a unique experience. How long did you stay there? Good. So we've got all these questions with did. How long did you stay there? Fo says, just a couple of days, but it was totally worth it. I definitely want to go back in the future. And Andy says, yeah, we should definitely plan a trip together next time. It sounds like an experience I don't want to miss out on. So perfect. You had a very natural conversation and asking an interesting place, Kangaroo Island, but a lot of questions. What did you do? That was amazing. How was your weekend? How long did you stay there? So really good past simple questions. Okay, then we have Javiera's group. So we have Eloise says, hi, Javiera, how are you? What did you do on the weekend? So we say on. What did you do on the weekend? I might take off how are you because it's two questions in one. Actually, no, that's fine because hi, Javiera, how are you? What did you do on the weekend? That's fine. Javiera says, hi, I'm fine, thanks. I went to Handorf with Janeth. Good. I like because you're a group of three people. So I went to Handorf with Janeth. And Janeth says, yeah, we visited a lot of nice places. So it's more common we say a lot of yeah rather than yes. So it's just yeah, we visited a lot of places. Eloise says, oh, wow. And how did you get there? Good. So she wants to know, like, how did you get there? Did you drive together? How did you get there? Javiera says, we went by car, but there are buses there too. Yeah, but there are buses that go there too. Iana says, have you been to Handorf before? So I might just add that word before. Usually we say, like, have you been there before? It's a very common question. It means like before this moment. Have you been there before? Eloise says, not yet. I like that, not yet, because that means, no, I haven't been there, but maybe one day I will. So not yet. What places would you recommend I visit? Perfect. A little bit formal if friends are saying that in English. It's more like what places, what places are good up there. I might just make it a little bit more casual. So what places are good up there? Now we say up there because it's up in the hills. So what places are good to see up there? And Javiera says there are museums, galleries, restaurants, and buildings that are over 150 years old. Yana says, yeah, and it's a very cultural center. So again, I might say, yeah, and we saw, because I want to practice the past, and we saw, you know, the German culture there. We saw the German culture there. Eloise says, I'm excited to go there. And Yana says, yes, you'll come to the Germanic village, see you there. Bit formal, so yeah. Yeah. Come with us next time. Something like that. Yeah, come with us next time. Javiera says, don't forget to visit the pubs. Yeah, don't forget to visit the pubs. That was the best part. Or don't forget to visit the pubs. That's what Handorf maybe is known for. They have a lot of good pubs up there. That's the best part. So whenever you say that you enjoyed something in your trip, the best part is a very common way that we say it. So that's the best part. See you. Perfect. And then Eloise says, see you girls. Yep. Perfect. Good. So very natural conversation with 3 friends, and using, we can see a regular verb here, visited. We can see an irregular, went. That means go. A question, have you been to Handorf before? A question, what places are good up there? Maybe were, let's just to make it a bit of a past, what places were good up there? We'll make this past. There were museum, galleries, restaurants. Nah, yeah, and we saw the German culture. The German culture. I'm excited to go there. Yeah, come with us next time. Okay, good. So thank you for sharing that. That was all the conversations we had. So again, we were looking at the past simple, and we're going to continue with the next lesson, really doing the same thing, just making sure we know the past simple, especially the irregular verbs, and also writing. So we're going to be getting more into a little bit of writing, and also asking someone, how was their evening? Like, how was their night? So we're going to listen to a conversation. We're going to be able to give our opinions, to say, yeah, my night was great. My evening was so good. I had the best time. I really enjoyed it. It was so amazing. So we're going to be speaking words like that and asking people what they did. So similar to what we did in our conversation. So that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow to continue the past simple. So speaking everything about our past. Okay, see you.